Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTechnics.com, and you may remember in the past we actually did a bit of a build guide. It was quite a long video, but it did go through absolutely everything to kind of build, I guess, an affordable gaming system. Well, I want to take it one step further today and maybe make something a little bit more extreme, but show you guys exactly how it's done. So with this build, I haven't really chosen a specific budget. I basically got a case and kind of worked around that. But I want to talk through all of the components kind of bit by bit so you can see why I chose that specific component over something else. So starting with the motherboard, this is basically at the heart of our build. We've gone with the Asus ROG Maximus 11 Hero Wi-Fi. So obviously having Wi-Fi means that we've got great connectivity options, and being a Hero-based board means that it has quite a few extra pieces of functionality, maybe over some of the competition or even some of the lesser boards from Asus. Now, to sort of go with this, because it is a Z390 based motherboard, we have decided to go for this processor here, which is the i7-9700K. Because it is a K model, it means that we can overclock it if we so wish, and maybe at the end of this video we might even just, tinker around with that a little bit. To sort of cool the processor down, we've gone with a Fantex air cooler. Again, we could have gone with maybe custom loop, or we could have gone with AIO, but we wanted to try and make this, I guess, as simple as possible. So storage wise, we have, I guess, the latest and greatest WD drive. So this is the WD Black. It's a 1 terabyte drive, and this is going to be perfect as our operating system drive. It is an NVMe drive, so that means we are going to get kind of our blistering fast speeds when we're loading up, the games that we want to load up, or even if we're using this as, I guess, kind of a productivity rig, such as a rendering machine. Obviously, we know that 1 terabyte isn't going to go extremely far. So we do have to kind of think, I guess, of secondary storage. And that's where this comes in. So this is a WD Blue 6 terabyte drive. Now, when it comes to the graphics card, we've decided we may as well kind of go for the latest and greatest. So we've gone with the RTX 2080 Super, but this is the NVIDIA Founders Edition. So a really, really nice looking card, and of course, fantastic performance, as well as having that RTX ray tracing functionality as well. Now, obviously, when it comes to all this, we are going to need a power supply that's going to be able to cater for it. So we've gone for the Fantex Revolt Pro. So this is an 850 watt PSU and is basically very, very nicely spec'd. It's 80 plus gold efficiency, and it has got sort of some really nice looking cables and that modularity to it as well. In terms of the memory, don't want to miss that out, but we've gone for Corsair, and we have actually gone for the Vengeance RGB Pro in white, and you will see later on in this video why we've gone for the white memory. Now, when it comes to the case, we've gone with the Fantex Eclipse P350X. Personally, for the price point, this is probably one of the best kind of value for money cases out there on the market. So before we actually get started with the build, there are a few things I typically like to use when I am building. So the first one actually came from Fantex, and basically it's just a set of kind of bits and bobs that I need to do everything. So I've got a screwdriver, which has got a little nut setter on there for setting your standoffs, but this comes off and then you can put on various different sort of, things. So you've got all of your different kind of Phillips sizes, your flatheads, you've got some kind of Torx, security Torx, Allen key sort of style. You got this for obviously water cooling, and then you've got a set of tweezers. Yes, The Verge, these are tweezers, not these. I'm always sort of using USB drives for kind of installing Windows, putting BIOS updates on and things like that. So I use this specifically for that. It's USB 3.0, so it installs Windows really, really fast. I have got some Velcro cable ties as well, which are always just really handy for kind of cleaning things up a little bit. And then, of course, some kind of a mug or a bowl or something like that, just to kind of keep screws and bits and bobs in there. Now, the first step that we want to do really is kind of preparing the case. Now, to do this, it's kind of, I guess, just really kind of dismantling the whole thing. So you will find that with a tempered glass chassis, it does come with a protective film on there. Some people take it off and kind of, then put it somewhere safe, but I always like to kind of keep it on until the very last minute, because otherwise there is always a chance that it's going to get scratched. So that one's actually got sort of thumb screws on it, as you saw. The other side, by the looks of it, has captive screws, and will just slide off, and then you can take the other side off. And again, store it somewhere safe. I'm not going to put it near the glass because it could always get scratched. Now, with this particular chassis, it has got a magnetic dust filter on the top. I'm purely going to take it off for the moment, just so I can kind of get a better view into the case. Now, I did mention earlier as well the fact that, we were going with kind of a black and white kind of theme, and now you can kind of see it, you know, starting to make a little bit more sense. Now, generally what you will find is when you get to this side and you look into the drive cages, you will find that there is an accessory box. Now, on this particular chassis, you have to take the front panel off just by kind of pulling on it. There's no connected cables because it simply has a nice little pin header. And then we can actually get access to this, and it simply pulls out. So I guess really next what we want to do is start preparing the motherboard and installing as many components as we physically can on the motherboard before we actually put it inside the case. So with the motherboard actually laid out on top of the motherboard box and the processor at the ready, what we're going to do is proceed to lift up the CPU socket. So on the socket itself, you will see that there is this little arm. Obviously on AMD processors, it will be slightly different, and on X299 platforms. This being 1150X, this is basically how it's done. You can lift it up from there. This will expose the pins. Obviously you don't want to touch these pins, but we want to put our processor directly into there. And you will find that on the processor, there is a little arrow, and this should be facing this bottom corner. So you will notice once that's in there, you can then proceed to push this down. And once you actually start pushing the arm down, the plastic protective cap will just simply come off. So the next stage is going to be installing our NVMe drive. So we're actually going to be putting in the top one, which I know is for NVMe drives as well as SATA M.2 drives. It's just a matter of unscrewing this. Obviously every motherboard is going to be different. Some are going to have heat shields on there. Some are just going to sort of have the bare drive sort of showing. Depends on really kind of how premium the motherboard actually is. So taking it off, and it will reveal the actual sort of area where we're going to put the M.2 drive. And you will notice that there's a little notch on there. So it's just a matter of kind of lining it up and pushing it in. And then what will happen is it will kind of sit down like that. Now on the back of the M.2 shield, you will notice that there is a kind of protective piece of film. We want to take that off so that it's making direct contact directly with the drive. I'd always advise not kind of tightening it all the way down so that you still kind of have a little bit of, I guess, movability to do the second screw on the other side. Obviously every heat shield is different depending on the motherboard. MSIs sort of work a little bit different. Gigabytes actually only have one screw in and kind of slot in the other side. So yeah, it's just a matter of screwing this down, and then that's your drive in place. So with the memory, again, motherboard dependent, you are going to find that it has these little notches that we can just open. On some motherboards, it will have it on the other side. On this particular one, it's actually fixed on one side and then kind of has the notches there. Then it's just a matter of lining up the memory module. You can see there's a little notch on the memory module and on the actual slot itself. And then with a little bit of force, pushing it down. So we've actually got 4 modules here. So we're going to do exactly the same with all 4 modules. And generally speaking, if there's a label on the back of the memory, it does generally go this way, but still try and line up the notch, because the last thing you want to do is try and force it in and get it the wrong way around. Now, depending on your cooler and of course the platform you're going to be using, you are going to have to sort of prepare the CPU socket area. So we're using an AIO cooler, the Fantex one that I showed you earlier, but it does come with a backplate for Intel, and it does sort of, I guess, go through the different platforms. If you are using LJ1366, you want to put these kind of corner pieces into the first hole. If you're using different platforms, then yeah, what hole to kind of put it into that corresponds. Then it's a matter of kind of lifting up the board, and you'll notice the 4 holes that are around the CPU socket. It's just a matter of kind of lining these up with the various kind of mounting points that are going to come through from the backplate. Once you've got them through, you'll find that kind of all of them kind of go through quite easily together. Just give it a little pull. And then there's some little sort of black caps that we can put onto there. And then we've got to think about, I guess, the orientation of our CPU cooler. So if the orientation of this is going to go this way, because of the way that it's going to be in the case, we want kind of air coming through here. Want it like that. So with these brackets, it's just a matter of kind of putting them on. And again, the instruction manuals will kind of, you know, talk through absolutely everything. But we're going to put it on like this and like this. And then it's just a matter of screwing it down. So obviously once you have got this prepared, you can then proceed to put your CPU cooler on, but you don't want to do so without putting a little bit of thermal paste on. Now, there's been so much talk, P method, line method, cross method, spread it method. I simply just put a little bit into the middle, sort of not quite a P, but you know, a decent size. Obviously, depending on the thermal paste that you use, it may come out a little bit easier, it may come out a little bit sort of, you know, tougher. but then you can go ahead and put your CPU cooler on. Now, first thing you want to do is peel this off. The amount of times I've seen where people have installed their CPU cooler and they wonder why it overheats over time. So take that off, and then orientation wise, like I said, this is going to be the front of our case, so this will kind of be, you know, this area here. So I want to put it on just like this, and again, follow your instructions for the actual CPU cooler that you're using, and that can go on like that. Now, the reason I like this screwdriver as well is the fact that it can be extended for moments like this. Now, what I always tend to do is do a couple of turns just so it bites, and then move back onto the other side, and you will have to kind of put a little bit of pressure on until it bites again, and then you can sort of screw down that side completely without fear of kind of, you know, bending on the CPU or the socket, and then go back to the other side and just kind of finish that side off. Now, this has actually got two fans on this particular CPU cooler, and we have sort of linked them up using a Y splitter. And it's just a matter of putting the fan back into place, like so, and then the same on the other side. She's gonna go this way round. So just make sure that you get kind of, you know, the direction of kind of what's going on. Make sure that you get the direction sort of perfect, basically, because what you want is, you don't want sort of the fans fighting against each other. You want one kind of, you know, pushing, one pulling, or two pushing or two pulling. You don't want them to sort of, yeah, fight against each other. So once we've done that, if I turn this around, you will see that we've got both of our fan connectors coming out into this Y splitter cable, and then it's just a matter of finding the appropriate one for your CPU fan. So we've got AIO pump, CPU optional, and CPU fan. So we're going to put it onto there. It is a 4-pin PWM header, and it's a 4-pin PWM connector. So that means we can control everything nicely on our CPU cooler. Now, when you actually first look at your case and where the motherboard's going to go, there's a couple of things that you need to make note of. So firstly, the standoff. So I can actually see that we have got 9 standoffs in place, and our motherboard has got 9 standoffs as well. So everything is in kind of the right location. And the thing I like about Fantex is the middle one is actually more of like an anchor point. So you don't actually screw that one down, but it just allows you to kind of position things nicely in terms of your motherboard. Another thing that you want to note is obviously the rear I/O shield. If you have gone for, I guess, a cheaper motherboard, you are going to have to put the rear I/O in, but on this particular board, you can see that the rear I/O is actually kind of built into the motherboard. It's just a matter of kind of offering it up to the rear I/O as well as that kind of mounting point. And we can see once we get on there, it will kind of hold itself in place to a certain degree. Obviously, I am still holding it at the back, and then you can sort of proceed to start screwing it in. So obviously we have to put 9 screws in total. So what I typically find myself doing is going for one corner, screwing it in just so we have like a bit of an anchor point, and then screwing in the opposite corner, which is obviously going to be up here, and screwing that one down. And then you can just continue to do this for the rest of the screws. Now, once you've got the motherboard in place, the first thing that I kind of like to do is sort out the front panel headers. So we've got one here for the HD audio, which is typically down there, and you will notice that it has got a blocked off pin. So it's just a matter of kind of matching it up. USB 3.0, we can see that we have got sort of just down here, so we can take this up through here. Other than that, we have got some other kind of front panel headers that I'm going to sort out and put onto the board. Now, there was a few other little connectors that this case has got specifically that I wanted to sort of talk about. So as well as kind of the power switch, there is a single fan, which is obviously situated at the front of the case. So I did have to plug that in. And this case does have a little bit of addressable RGB on it. There is this cable up here, which is an addressable kind of 3-pin 5-volt fan connector. So we have got that as well. There is a SATA power connector that I need to put in once the power supply's in, but just wanted to sort of go through that. Obviously every case is different, but just wanted to kind of cover all bases. Now, taking the front panel off, I love the way that this comes off because of these little pins and the way that that connects, but we want to start installing the hard drive. So we've got 2 hard drive cages here. I typically go for the top one because what we can do is just kind of remove the bottom one, and we can get rid of that. It's just a nice place to kind of, you know, have for, I guess, cable management. And then we can take this out, and obviously every drive bay for every case is different, but on this one, it's a matter of kind of pulling these out, getting your drive kind of lined up. This is probably the worst part of any kind of installation on any kind of system, is doing the hard drives, because trying to line everything up at the same time is just an absolute ball ache. And it's just a matter of kind of installing there. And you can see that we have now kind of the room for, you know, putting stuff in. So it's just a matter of getting our SATA cable connector and power connectors onto here, and the hard drive is basically good to go. So the SATA cable that you will get with your motherboard, generally you'll get two different types. So you get the ones with the kind of normal cable ends on it, and then the ones with the right angle. And looking at the motherboard, it seems that we're better off using the right angle here. So it's just a matter of doing that and then just kind of routing your cable through and trying to make things kind of as clean as possible. So let's get the power supply in and then hook everything else up. Now there's different ways of doing this depending on the case, because what you will find with some cases, especially when you have a large CPU cooler, is trying to get to these is a little bit difficult once it's actually in and connected to the power supply. So the power supply we've got, the Revolt Pro, is completely modular, but I typically, if I'm using extensions or something like that, which would obviously look a lot nicer on a build like this, then what I'll find that I'll do is kind of install sort of some of the connectors before kind of even really installing the motherboard in the case. Now the reason for that is just because, as you can see, it's a little bit difficult trying to sort of get everything lined up. So once I got them two through, which admittedly did sort of cut on my hand a little bit, hindsight is bliss and everything, purely I like to sort of plug all the rest of the connectors in. So obviously we've got our motherboard connector, which is our 24 pin. They brand it as motherboard just to kind of confuse you a little bit. But put that into there. We also have our PCI Express. You can see that everything's kind of labeled quite nicely and quite easily to sort of follow along with. So PCI Express, we can put that one in up there. And then we have one for our SATAs. So really you kind of want to have a look at, I guess, what connectors you're going to need and just kind of make it a little bit easier for yourself when you're doing everything. So once we've kind of got all of that in, we can then proceed to plug in the other two, which were obviously for the CPU that we kind of already did in a roundabout kind of way. And for this one, some cases it's going to actually slide in from the back. This one is actually going to go in from this way. Now there is a big debate about whether you should have the fan facing upwards or facing sort of downwards. In this particular case, there is a little bit of clearance underneath. There is also, if I lift up the chassis slightly, you'll see that there is a dust filter in here as well. So they've kind of thought about it and said, you know, your fan should be facing downwards. Kind of slide it in from the side, and then we can start screwing it in. It's just a matter of taking the screws that come with either the chassis or the power supply and screwing it in. Never screw everything in fully tight on the first go, because you will find that obviously one side of the power supply will drop, or other component that you may be doing will drop, and therefore you won't be able to get in the other screws. And always kind of go in a cross motion. So do from here to here, then back over to the furthest point, and then into here. So we have got obviously our SATA connector cables ready to go now. So we can take that through the side. You will notice on your SATA connector there is kind of a right angled little bit. So it's just a matter of kind of lining that up like so. And then once we've done that, we can kind of hide that back down. We can take our front cover again, which want to make sure it's the right way, so the pins correspond to the pins here, so that everything kind of does what we need it to do, and clip it back on. Then really it's just a matter of kind of taking your various connectors and pushing them through, so that when you sort of bring it around this side, you can see that our 24 pin, so it's a matter of kind of pulling it through a little bit, plugging it in. It can only go in one way, and then sort of pulling it back a little bit. Obviously, as I mentioned, if we did a cable extensions, this would look a little bit nicer, but that's kind of the route that we've gone down. But we've got the SATA power connector here. So we just want to kind of, again, match it all up, plug it into there. I'm guessing this is kind of lighting or something that's on the chassis. And then we can kind of hide our cables down here. Obviously, with this particular case, there is plenty of room for kind of cable routing. So we've got kind of the Velcro cable ties here and here. As I mentioned earlier, it's always kind of good practice to have it. For the sake of trying to keep this video short, concise, and to the point, I am gonna probably not cable manage this too much at all. But really all you want to do is just make sure that all your cables don't kind of protrude through. The 24 pin is always the worst. So just kind of tuck it out the way a little bit. So PCI Express really is the only other thing that we've got. And the beauty about this case is they have a hole specifically here just for PCI Express. So if we kind of route around, we can sort of take this through And it actually gives a really nice look when your graphics card's in there. This can kind of just go in from the front. So graphics card wise, I'm actually finding a lot of chassis manufacturers are kind of putting this little shielded bit on here, I guess, where you can kind of unscrew it. And I guess it just kind of locks down your expansion brackets. So take these screws out, and then this whole kind of plate, which covers over the expansion brackets, does come out. Now, generally speaking, you are going to be looking at the second and third slots. I have kind of offered it up myself off camera, and yeah, it was a second and third. So we just want to unscrew the second one. And I like the fact that they've kind of gone for the monochrome look here, with kind of, you know, one slot being black and then the next one being white and so forth. It just, I don't know, adds to a little bit of kind of design flair as opposed to kind of what we're used to seeing on most. So we've gone for the RTX 2080 Super, which I've already got fingerprints literally all over. And then it's a matter of kind of offering it up, and you will notice, obviously the first thing you want to do is make sure that this little gate is open, because if it's closed down, it's not going to get in. So basically making sure that it's open, lining it up with them slots that you've kind of taken out, and then you'll see that it kind of slots in, and then just give it a little push. So using exactly the same screws that kind of you took the expansion brackets out with, you can proceed to screw that in. And what I like to do is, as I'm doing the top one, just kind of lift it up a little bit, just so you're eliminating kind of any sag as you're screwing it up. So what we can do is kind of push this in like that. And this is going to be our 8 pin, and push that in. And then our 6 pin, just need to turn it over. Obviously these can only go in one way. The only annoying thing is obviously we have got the extra 2 pin there, but I mean, if you wanted, you could get a black cable tie and just kind of tie this around there. And that is basically everything done. So all I'd say now is you've got to put the side panels on. And as I mentioned, with this side panel, it's kind of easier just kind of putting it down like this, so you can kind of tuck stuff away, get the side panel on, make sure there's some weight on it and push it down. Yep, that's all clear. And then with the captive screws, we can screw that back in. I mean, for me, I do like doing cable management to a certain degree if I'm going to keep a rig for, you know, a prolonged amount of time. But for the most part, when it's a rig like this that's not going to be built for very long, as long as it looks clean on this side, what I call the business side, then that's all that matters to me. Now, you may remember I took this off earlier just to kind of, you know, make sure that I could sort of see everything. I can now put that back in. And then with the other side, I can get my tempered glass panel. And this one's for you guys. Ready? Oh, gotta love that noise. And I'm actually pretty impressed with this chassis. For the money, which in the UK is about 60 quid, I think in the US it's probably about 70 US dollars. I'm pretty impressed with kind of, I guess, the functionality that it has. You've kind of got this shroud, which actually kind of appears on the outside. The tempered glass doesn't kind of come down, which is quite an interesting one. There is obviously the flexibility to have some of the latest components with, you know, stupidly long graphics cards. You could even put custom loop water cooling in here. That is pretty much it. There is the system. And I guess now it comes down to the moment of truth. So power cable's in. Everything seems to be lit up. So if we press the power button, we get nothing.
Andy, what are you doing?
I may or may not have put the power button pins the wrong way around, but it's sorted now. So try and get this glass back on for the second time. Power button. There we go. So as I mentioned sort of at the beginning of this case has got addressable RGB. You can see this really sort of faint line going all the way down there. Looks really, really nice actually. Obviously we've got our memory, which is lighting up kind of rainbow effect. The graphics card is just going to be green because it is an NVIDIA based graphics card, but our motherboard is kind of cycling through various colors at the top here and also down the bottom. Overall, I think this looks pretty damn nice. Everything with kind of the addressable, the front is nice and clean, but you do have that kind of nice subtle addressable RGB on the side. But obviously we do have the whole kind of black and white theme. So I might keep this as a little sort of, I don't know, rig to do something with. Obviously I may even look to, yeah, overclock this and that. Let me know in the comments section below if you want to see more from this rig. I did mention at the start of this video, but I kind of feel like it's gone on a bit too long, that I was going to overclock this and do this with it and do that with it. I mean, if I had more time and maybe did like a part 2 to this, I'd maybe even take the fan out the front, put it in the back, or get another couple of fans, so one at the front, another one at the back, another one at the front. There may even be room to put some at the top, maybe switch it out for an AO, maybe do some custom loop, but where do I end? That's the biggest problem. I've got so many projects on at the moment, especially involving stuff like custom loop, which takes a little bit longer. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, whether you're a noob, whether you're an expert, whether you do this day in, day out, or whether you've never done it before. Hopefully it's given you a little bit of the confidence and kind of a bit of a guide as to how to do it. I'm hoping I didn't make any mistakes apart from that power button one, which, you know, I will hold my hands up to. No one's perfect, but yeah, I don't think I made any other mistakes. If I did, I'm sure you guys are going to point it out in the comment section. Yes, we've all seen the Verge video. Yeah, until next time, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.